Okay. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Michael Wargo. I'm proud to be the Executive Director here at Willamalane Park and Recreation District. And we're thrilled to share with you some information from our needs assessment portion of the update of our comprehensive plan, which started back in 2012, and this is an update of that plan. This will set the direction for Willamalane for the next 10 years. And without a doubt, the most important thing that we collect and that we really truly value is the input that we get from our community. This will all come from you. So before we begin tonight, I just want to thank everyone for being an engaged partner of Willamalane and helping us shape the future of your park district. So tonight you're going to hear about the project, some preliminary findings from our community outreach needs assessment, and then we'll have some time for anyone to ask questions to our partner consultants, BerryDunn, who will be introducing themselves in a little bit, as well as the Willamalane staff that's here this evening. Tonight, this meeting will be moderated by Kenny Wygant, our Director of Community Engagement. And lastly, before we begin, I'd like to recognize our elected officials that are here in the room with us this evening, as well as online. We have President of the Willamalane Board, Chris Wigg. Thank you, President Wigg, for being here. We have Director Greg James with us here this evening. And Kenny, is there anyone online?
Renee.
And online, we'd like to welcome Renee Jones, Vice President, also of the Willamalane Park and Recreation Board. Hello, Renee. Hope you're feeling better. Okay, so without ado, I'll turn it over to Kenny Wygant. Thank you again.
Hi, everybody. As Michael mentioned, my name is Kenny Wygant. I work with our community engagement team. So I'm going to read a few rules of engagement and how we're going to operate the meeting tonight. So this meeting is happening both in person at the Willamalane Fog Keeper Center and online at Microsoft Teams. After our presentation, our project team will answer questions. Please note that the meeting questions are being recorded for public record tonight. Tonight's presentation will take about an hour, and then we'll have about 30 minutes of time for questions at the end. We do ask that if you have questions, you hold them until the very end of the presentation, and we will answer them in order as they come. The other thing we wanted to ask is that if you have something that is a question, we ask that it pertains to the content that you see tonight. If you have something that's more directed for our board of directors, we do ask that you submit that via public comment. If you're interested in submitting public comment to us, you're welcome to catch me after the meeting and we can give you instructions how to properly do that. If you do have questions tonight, you have 3 options to do so. If you're in person and you're comfortable speaking in front of everyone, you can simply raise your hand. Christina Bowe behind us, she will be the microphone passer to make sure that you can get your question heard by everybody here. If you're not comfortable speaking in person, we have question comment cards in the back. You can fill out one of those and bring it to me, and I will happily read that question so that way you don't have to read that aloud. And then if you're on Microsoft Teams tonight, you can type a question at any point throughout the presentation in the chat. I'll hold those to the very end, and then I will read those questions to our presenters. We also have some accessibility options that we wanted to share tonight. So if you're joining online, you can turn on your closed captioning. On your Teams menu bar, if you just look for the 3 dots that says more, just hit that and do your drop down and it's say turn on live captions. That will give you closed captioning and it will automatically transcribe the text tonight. The room that we're in tonight has a hearing loop. So if you have a compatible device, it should be working right now. If you need a device, you're welcome to contact Chuck Dinsfriend. He is the man in the middle pulling all the strings tonight for us. And he can help set you up with a hearing loop compatible device. We are very, very thankful to have Leanne Thompson with us tonight, who is doing live American Sign Language translation. So thank you very much. We will also be translating the slides and the information that's shared tonight in Spanish. That will be available after this presentation at willamalane.org/future. So if you're interested in doing these in Spanish, we will have that option also. And last, if you would like to view all of the findings tonight, you can do so at willamalane.org/future. There's a link where you can download the full PDF to see all this information. So without further ado, I'd like to, oh, yes.
Director Reinhardt is also here. You can please introduce him.
Director Brooke Reinhardt, one of our Willamalane Board of Directors, is also here tonight. So tonight we have some presenters from our consulting agency for this project, BerryDunn. We are very, very thankful that they came in. They kind of came from all over. I will let them introduce themselves. But our lead presenter tonight with them is Jeff. So come on up. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Kenny. And good evening, members of the board and members of the community and members who are online. My name is Jeff Melkus and I'm a consultant, senior consultant with BerryDunn. BerryDunn is a management company that specializes in long-term strategic management planning. And we have a part of our organization that is very focused on parks, recreation, and libraries. And we're very, very pleased to be able to put this project together, and I'm very pleased personally to be the project manager. There are several people who are on the project with us, and some are here with us and some are not, and I'd like to take a moment to just acknowledge and show you who they are. James Mickle is actually in the Springfield area tonight, but he's not with us. Tom Deal is our manager, kind of the quality control person, and Dave Peterson is with us, and he'll be presenting a lot of really interesting information. Dan Jenkins is a sub-consultant from Sierra Design. Dan is taking a very deep dive into the trails program, and both regional and local. And Kaylin Villier did a lot of the analysis, the assessments on the parks, came and visited with the earlier on project. Oops. So just to give you a little bit of background, the role that Willamalane plays in the city of Springfield. Obviously, the district is a special district that provides and delivers the recreation park services. They're the steward of 46 parks, trails, and facilities, and they are nationally recognized. Multiple, what we call gold medal winner, meaning that the National Association Parks and Recreation looks at agencies around the country and then chooses once a year in different categories by size who the best agency in the country is. And Willamalane has won that honor multiple times and is recently accredited, one of only 210 agencies, I think, out of over 6,000 in the United States. So the project timeline, January 2022, as Michael told you, and it goes until June of 23. We hope to have a draft of the plan available for the community just after the holidays, and it will take about 5 or 6 months to refine it. And the reason is that engagement is a big part of this process, and the engagement with the community doesn't end until we actually adopt. So we'll be looking at opportunities to confirm and ensure that what we know is, what we've learned is correct. The project is about 50% complete as of now. So tonight, we've done our team member introductions. We'll talk a little bit about the vision. We'll go into the results, starting with community profile. We'll talk about the engagement efforts, the survey findings. We'll go into what we call level of service findings, which is how well your parks perform and provide exceptional service to your community. We'll then go to next steps, what the timeline looks like, and offer opportunities for questions. So we will complete for the vision a 20-year update from the 2012 plan. We know that it's good practice about every 10 years. So budgetarily and such, the plan will really focus on the first 10 years. However, there will be an outlook looking forward even beyond all the way to 20 years. We'll develop a plan that's fully implementable, meaning that for everyone in the organization, we try to do what we can to make it as simple as possible, but at the same time, we try to make it so that everyone can understand how we get from A to B to C to accomplish the recommendations and findings from the plan. We'll ensure that the plan complies with Oregon planning rules. We've taken a real effort to ensure that diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice, philosophy, and opportunities are included within the plan. We're looking at a lot of other plans and planning documents to ensure consistency, and of course, very robust community engagement. So let's jump right into the community profile. working with the Portland State Population Research, working with the census data that we've got the most recent, we know that the population has grown greatly since 2000, but since the 2012 timeframe, it's grown about 67,000 upwards of about 70,000 or so. Going forward, the forecast will get you to about 75,000 in 2035. We feel very confident in that number. And the takeaway from this is that it is growth. While it is growth, it is modest. So to dive even deeper into this, we look at the age distribution. We look at the trends in terms of what's going to happen within the age groups in your community. And this is really important for a recreation agency or a district because it informs and tells folks who they will be serving moving out into the future. So if you look at the younger age groups, the 0 to 4 up through 15 to 19-year-olds, say, what you have is very little difference between now and 2026. So the conclusion is that it's a fairly stable opportunity for programming. You can plan youth sports and enrichment classes for children. Youth camps, you can pretty well know that the age groups are, they may not grow a lot, but they will stay fairly stable. The takeaway from this really is the older populations, folks from 55 up. You can see that the community is getting older. As the community ages, the need for senior programs and the need for adult programs grows and increases. So again, what's important here is to recognize that the median age since the last master plan has grown from 34 in some year or some months to over 38 years old. And that's a significant increase in terms of age just within the community. We looked at the percentage of race, ethnic groups within the community, and we do this so that we can get a gauge on who the community is and from a cultural standpoint, what kinds of activities, what kinds of programs and such to offer. While Springfield in the urban growth boundary, which is where we look and find the data, is 82, almost 83% white. Hispanic populations make up almost 15%. And this represents a growth rate. This is going to be increasing during the study period. That's when we fill it to approximately 17%. So there are opportunities there, especially from a marketing standpoint and from the standpoint of trying to ensure that we are as inclusive as possible to reach out to all members of the community. We looked at the health rankings to see what the health outcomes might be in terms of programs and activities. And so to start there, we look to see how are people in terms of being physically active or inactive, and how are people in terms of obesity. And those are really the two bigger takeaways on this particular slide we're showing. Just as the state of Oregon, folks within Springfield are about 29% obese. Why this is important, and especially important here, is that the district is in a unique position to be able to affect that. They have gymnasiums and classes and instructors and swimming pools and things that can affect the health outcomes of a community. We also know about physical inactivity, and the district is about one out of 4 in that case. So we further dove into the data and understand that there is a significant number of individuals who report disabilities within the community. So while the state of Oregon is 14%, we know that the district is about 19%. And what this tells us is that almost 1 in 5 have some form of a disability. And in fact, many have multiple disabilities. You would expect, as the population continues to age, that ambulatory, self-care, independent living may be impacted by those increases in aging. So we looked at trends, trying to understand what is out there in the nation, in the region, in the state. And what we realize is that there are a number of activities and such. We won't be spending a lot of time talking about it tonight, but disc golf, for instance, or pickleball, very big in terms of trends coming forward. In the planning effort, we identified a number of those kind of trends as opportunities in important areas for the district to explore. So we did pull data for both Oregon and Springfield in terms of adult fitness participation. And the takeaway from this is that both the city, both the district and the state kind of mirror the same line. You can see that swimming and walking for exercise are really the two largest participatory activities within the district and within the state of Oregon. And that's important to be able to know when you ask the question, as a district, are we meeting the needs of our community? Well, those are two of the needs that show up. However, we dove even further, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in a little bit. So in order to truly understand what's happening within the district and what people's needs are, we looked at community engagement, and we launched a very robust opportunity for community members to become involved. It was multimodal, meaning there's many opportunities here, everything from our survey, which we'll talk about, to stakeholder and focus group meetings and interviews, public meetings such as this, and a number of other intercept events that the district was able to accomplish. All in total, up until the end of October, there were 3,866 pieces of touch point or recommendations or suggestions from your community. These weren't just folks who showed up at a particular meeting. These are folks who gave us their input. And many of them in surveys, many of them out in parks, providing input. That is a really good number when we look at a robust, a goal of a really robust engagement. These are some of the folks that we spoke to, folk partners like the utility board, Oregon legislature representatives, district staff, sports advocates, and the like. But we also focused on special groups with the intention of taking even a deeper dive. So called together a group, I think there were over 100 teams that wanted to give us their input. The Latinx community, tribal communities in the area. We met with trails advocates, accessibility and inclusion advocates, and folks who have a role in the community in terms of advocating for those areas. Community wellness, we still will be talking and hosting an event for that. So we asked a lot of the similar questions in order to try to best understand the points at which different groups and different opportunities kind of intersected. So district strengths, we asked, what's great about the Willamalane Park and Recreation District? Well, community support, the fact that they're a district, all by itself is a really important advantage here for the community because of the funding base. Leadership and the board representation came up over and over again. The partnerships, which are absolutely some of the best that I've seen anywhere around the United States. The One Pass, the trail system, there's lots of really great strengths. This is only one small representative sample of repeated strengths. So then we asked, what can we do to improve? Well, better class and activity times came up multiple times. Communication with non-users. While communication was generally favorable to the community and very, very much, I'd say, appreciated by the community, communication with people who aren't generally users, aren't swimmers or users of the parks is something that we heard quite a bit of. Lack of bilingual signage is important. Access to the pools. And of course, we acknowledge the fact that coming out of the COVID pandemic, that there is some of that residual from the closures of the faculty pool. Desired recreation amenities. We ask folks, what do you want to make your recreation experience better? Well, additional restrooms is probably at the top of the list, or is at the top of the list. And interestingly enough, was also at the top of the list across the spectrum of folks who we spoke with, including the younger teens. Better connectivity of bike paths and trails. Disc golf, pickleball, you can see the list is down. All-inclusive playgrounds was something that's really desired, meaning playgrounds that individuals that may have disabilities can participate on, or can participate at every single point within that playground. Now, we asked folks, we investigated, what are the barriers that might limit folks from participating? There are walking routes to parks, that there are streets or railroad tracks that may prevent people from getting from one place to the other. Accessibility with disabilities, facility availability, that goes back to the hours question, and the district outreach to non-users. So we'll move into the survey. We, as part of the engagement process, we looked at presenting a survey by mail to a little more than 4,500 people, not knowing what the response rate would be, but we had planned to really market the surveys and promote them, as the district did very, very well. We ended up with 1,598 responses to the survey. And I can tell you that that's a really good number in terms of surveys. Survey was broken into two pieces: a statistically valid portion, and the reason the statistically valid survey is really important to this process is that it captures both users and non-users. The open link survey was a survey that everyone in the community was encouraged to fill out. And you can see we have many more open link survey responses. So when we did comparison between the open link and the random, they were very, very similar in terms of their responses. Again, 1,598 survey responses were good. So then we looked to see who is it that filled out the survey, because we wanted to know for sure what the demographic of the survey respondents was, so that we can check it against the general population demographic information. And you can see that 50% had children in the household. 58% of folks who completed the survey own a dog, which was important, because then we know we can gauge, if we know the number of dogs. We had 91% of the respondents were white and 8% Latinx or Hispanic. Those numbers are a little bit off from the rest of the demographic information, but it's not atypical. It's pretty normal. People that complete surveys are quite often a little bit older, white females. But we did weight the responses so that we knew that the percentage of, say, people who are in different ethnic backgrounds would be sufficiently accounted. 23% of respondents for the survey had a disability. Recalling that we were at 19% in terms of the demographic, I think we're pretty close. So the findings, and again, there's a lot of information here, and the survey data is available online. You'll be able to look at it and find all of the information that we will be talking about tonight. If you haven't used some of Willamalane's parks, we ask people why. Well, lack of time, and that's not unusual for a survey. What's important is the second and the third item, not being aware of programs offered or facilities available. While people in the survey told us they were very familiar with the district, what we learned is 67% said, I'm not tracking exactly what your programs say, are for activities. There's a real drop off after those, and you can see that the invite sample is not all that really than the open link. There are a few differences there. Reasons for non-use were consistent with individuals with and without disability. We asked about opportunities to increase use. So if you don't use, or you do use the parks or facilities, what can we do a little bit better that would assist you? And what we learned was, again, increased communication, expanded hours of operation, lower pricing and user fees, Overall, the invitation survey, because of it's statistically valid, is one that we pay just a little bit more attention to. And again, 49% said, if you improve communication, you tell me a little more about the programs and activities, I may be more likely to participate. So then we ask people, how welcome do you feel in the parks and facilities? And we ask this question so that we can gauge the differences between different groups and such. We also really want to know, as a measure of how is the district doing as far as its outreach and customer service? What do people really feel about? How happy are they with the service level? Well, what we learned was on a scale of 1 to 5, people feel very welcome. The average is 4.4. When we ask people of Hispanic and Latino background, how do you feel the same way? It's 4.3 on that same scale. Definitely a cause for celebration here. I generally, in this kind of survey research around the country, very seldom see those numbers that close. So then we ask folks about the importance of facilities and amenities. What's really important to you? And we ask on the same scale of 1 to 5, but we also ask people to tell us their top 10, because we know that people are interested in many, many different things. Well, 9 out of 10 survey respondents told us that park safety and maintenance was really important to them. And so that doesn't suggest that park maintenance is good or is bad. It's just what's really important to you. Natural areas, trails, restrooms in parks, and then you can see a little bit of a drop off. So we made things a little more difficult for people. We said, now let's challenge you to take that list and tell us what your top 3 future priorities are. So looking forward now, what are your top 3 things? And we need a long list. Trails and bike paths, an outdoor swimming pool, and park safety and maintenance. And the rest of them drop off a little bit. Those numbers don't compare to the amount of need, because people weren't allowed to choose more than the 3 in this case. When we ask people, now that we know what's important to you, how well are your needs being met for programs and facilities? Well, we learned that most all of the district's programs collectively are meeting the needs of district residents. We know that in terms of amenities, 41% of respondents said we would rate on a scale of 1 to 5, somewhere between 4 and 5 for the amenities that show up in the park and or in the parks. Respondents are most satisfied. They are most pleased in this case with the One Pass program, which is a phenomenal opportunity for people. When we dive a little deeper, we try to look at the delta, the difference between people's thoughts about what they feel is really important and how well their needs are being met. Again, remembering that on the scale of 1 to 5, if you're measuring, if you're coming to 3 as your median, your middle measure, that's where we would say people's needs are typically being met. And you can see, say, for park safety and maintenance, so while it's very important to people as a scale, at a rating of 4.5, their needs are being met 3.9. So more or less, the district is meeting the needs of the most important elements that the community is desiring. But if you want to even grow the district to even do better, if you want to look for a way to say, we're doing great already, but now we want to even take the step, we want to move the end zone down a few steps and even try to improve more. These 4 areas could be areas where improvement could be made, could be focus areas. So then we looked into recreation programs a little deeper in the survey, and we asked folks about what are your most important future programming needs? Where are they at? Communities Farmers Market, which is interesting because it's been offered in the past. Inclusive programs for individuals with disabilities, enrichment classes, food access programs, typically for individuals sort of maybe a little bit older, community special events. You can see the list. One of the takeaways here is actually number 6 and 7, which are programs for adults 18 to 50. We realize there's a bit of a gap in terms of programming for those age groups, and especially moving forward as the community ages for those who are over 50. We ask folks again, now pare it down. Tell us your top 3 future priorities. And what we learned is that people are real interested in more trails and bike paths, outdoor swimming pool, park safety and maintenance. Now, if this sounds familiar to you, that's actually a very good thing, because when we ask the same question in a sense with multiple ways of getting to it, and we start getting the same answers, what we say is that we've kind of saturated the thinking and the ideas. In other words, we're to the point where then we're confirming what people are telling us. Folks with Latinx background are a little less interested in trails and outdoor swimming pool, but they are still very interested in those. But even more so, splash pads and additional restrooms. Again, we did what we could to break out some of the different opportunities there. Knowing that the trail system is among the more important parts of what the district may offer, we broke that into we even took a deeper dive. We asked folks, what are your top 3 priorities for improvement of the trail system? And what we've learned is soft surface hiking trails, really in scenic settings. You have some beautiful buttes and hiking opportunities here regionally that may be kind of what we say loved to death and really well used. So what we're looking at is what can the district do? What in its position can it do to help improve hiking opportunities? We know connectivity between existing trails and accessible walking trails, perhaps trails that don't have a lot of elevation to them are important to people. Part of this plan, in fact, an entire section of the comprehensive plan will be dedicated and focused on trails, starting regionally and then moving in locally. And we expect to be able to report on that here in the not too distant future. We asked people when it came to programs as well, what kind of age groups should receive additional programs? And just as we found in the engagement portion of the program or the project, and what we found in other survey responses, really adults 18 to 50 and adults 50 plus are kind of coming to the top there. Not surprising. When we look at communication, how well is the district doing communicating with you? What we found was that the effectiveness of the communication was over 3 was being met, with 5 being very effective and 1 being not so effective. The open respondents was just slightly higher. They often are advocates or people who have children in swimming lessons or use the parks, and they're always keeping an eye out for opportunities to understand and learn about what the district is doing. Basically, the district is doing a really good job communicating, but there is some room for improvement. In the plan, we'll make comparisons between how people are receiving information and how they prefer to receive information by age group and by ethnic background in a number of other ways. During the survey process, we were very excited to see that a great number of folks filled out open-ended comments for us. We're very passionate about it. We ended up with over 600 survey comments, and that's a big number. Some of these are very repeated, most. These are in random order. Though people told us about it, the need for an outdoor pool and more access to restrooms and parks and the like. We also learned that households, some people told us, were just not aware of some of the existing activities. But overall, we heard a real theme about the great job that the district does in delivering parks and recreation services. Many comments up to the top on that. So at this point, I'd like to ask my colleague Dave Peterson to talk to you a little bit about the level of service for your community.
So my job or what I do is I go out and visit other parks. We came to town and spent about a week here, driving around and visiting all of the parks, all 45, 46 parks. I think we've decided we have in town at the district. These were some of the things that we saw as we were out driving around, looking at those parks. We saw in the survey how important trails were, and so the ability to access trails is very important. We thought the district had a really good standard, if you will, for trails and trailheads. And we knew that when we got to a trailhead, there'd be a restroom there, that there would be signage there, there'd be a kiosk, there'd be a drinking fountain, a bike rack, if you will, parking lot. So again, a really good standard. One of the main things we often talk about is branding for the district, and this idea of having consistent signage and really claiming your parks, if you will, through that signage is really important in that branding. We often run into agencies that need to replace playgrounds, and we found some of that in your district. But we also saw 3 new playgrounds, and so we recognize that replacement schedule is in place and that is moving forward, and we can't replace every playground every year, and so having a replacement schedule is very important. We did see some of the courts, some of the basketball courts, tennis courts, those types of things were maybe in need of that same type of replacement schedule. So maybe that's a goal going forward, is to get those on a replacement schedule. When we were here, it rained the whole time, and so we kind of found ourselves looking for shelter, if you will. And so maybe this is a little bit biased, but the need for more shelters in your park system may allow people like us, strangers from out of town, to get out of the rain.
It's called a raincoat.
Exactly. It's good. And as we move along here into some of the scoring, you'll see that the park system the parks are classified in different classifications. One of the classifications is neighborhood park. Within that classification itself, we saw a wide range of scores. So a big difference in quality and offerings of the neighborhood park classification. So that's something we'll get to here in a minute. So like I said, we went around to each park. We created a GIS map. So we took our iPads around and we located all of the components in those parks. And so a component is something you might go to a park to use, like a playground, a tennis court, a picnic shelter, a loop walk, a piece of open turf, where you might throw the frisbee or kick the ball. So those are components, again, things that you might go to a park to use. You see those listed on the data sheet, if you will, by name. Here in Quartz Park, we have a basketball court, we have a loop walk, a piece of open turf, and a local playground. Not only did we count each of those components, but we gave them each a quality score. So we looked at them on a scale of 1 to 3, with 3 being the best, kind of the best playground in town, or the best tennis court in town. 2 being really that standard, so things that you would do continuously across the agency. We saw one playground in one neighborhood park on one side of town, then we went to another neighborhood park on the other side of town. Were those playgrounds similar? Were they kind of meeting that standard? So really looking at comparing you to yourself, if you will. And then things that needed to be fixed, things that needed to be addressed, may score a 1. We call that low scoring components. So things that scored a 1 are things that kind of rise to the top in our system. We also know that there's some things, and we heard in the survey again, that you can put in a park that's going to make people stay more convenient or more comfortable, such as restrooms. But for restrooms in a park, people can stay longer, kids can stay longer. We don't have to run down the street to McDonald's, those types of things. Shade is very important, drinking fountains, parking, all of those things we call comfort and convenience items. Those factor into this overall score of a park. Up in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a cumulative score, if you will. So each park that we went to kind of created this score. I talked about the difference in classifications, and so those scores really relate to other parks in that classification best. So if you look at the 3 community parks in town, we can really compare those to see which ones have the greatest offerings, which ones have the highest level of service. So again, if you think about level of service, think about going to a park with more things to do scores higher in this system. So the more components, you add up the components, the more components, the more things there are to do, the higher the score. In this case, Willamalane Park scored the highest. The difference between, you may ask, in the difference between the neighborhood and community score is the community score factors in quantity. So if there's 8 pickleball courts, you get a higher score. It relates better to the community as a whole. But it doesn't really matter to me if I have to walk across the street, whether or not there's 1 pickleball court or 8 pickleball courts. Fact is, I can walk across the street and get a pickleball court. So that's really the difference between the neighborhood score and the community score. So again, comparing these, all pretty similar in offerings at that community park level. I mentioned earlier that we saw a big difference in this neighborhood park level. You see Meadow Park third at the top at 46 and 79. That's pretty comparable to those community park scores. And we see Tyson and James Park, they're at the bottom with 9 points and 6 points. So a huge range in this section. That may suggest that maybe Meadow Park is misclassified. Maybe it actually is more of a community park. It has 8 pickleball courts, right? So, maybe it really is serving as more of a community resource than kind of that walk across the street, a neighborhood type of park. Again, just a recognition of the park classifications are meant to guide us into what to expect at each of those parks. Next classification is this great sports park out here, West Schwab. We also have a couple kind of smaller sports parks that scored lower. Again, a little bit more specialized, so the scores may vary a little bit more. Special use park, we all know that Doris Ranch is a great park, has a lot of different offerings. Again, really high on this level, and very quality components there too. So the quality of Doris Ranch really helps raise that score. Linear parks, we heard how important trails are. So the fact that you have this linear park classification is also very important. One of the other ways of measuring level of service is to compare to other similar sized agencies or to national statistics, if you will. So how do we compare to other agencies in the number of parks that we offer, the number of acres that we offer? Those are often comparisons that we'll make. So in this case, we've done quite a bit of work in Oregon. And I realized that when I was looking at this, there was a big range of size of agencies from Umatilla to up to Tualatin Hills. And so it really wasn't fair to compare you maybe to Tualatin Hills, or maybe not fair to Umatilla to compare you to them. So I took these comparisons that really took population out of the factor, or factored in that per capita, if you will. In this case, we see that based on other agencies, you're maybe lower in the number of parks or high in the number of people that use each of your parks. And so maybe you need more parks, just strictly numbers of parks. But we do see that you're higher in the development of those parks. So the parks that you do develop maybe score a little bit higher than some other agencies. So you don't have a lot of those 6 and 9 point parks. You have a lot more in the middle, maybe than some other agencies. That's really kind of the key to this slide. NRPA, the National Recreation and Parks Association, Jeff talked about, also puts out its own statistics. And again, this is self-reported from other agencies, so we never know kind of how they're counting, especially in this case, say rectangle fields. How do we count rectangle fields? So take this one with a grain of salt. Also, we see that you are kind of above the median in playgrounds, basketball courts and pickleball courts, but maybe below the median, and tennis courts. Diamond fields, you're doing pretty well. Rectangles, again, it kind of depends on how you count them. Are we counting full-size adult soccer fields, or are we counting U8 kids soccer field? How are we configuring those? So we'll take that with a grain of salt. Dog parks and skate parks, really, you're not going to trigger the need for that next one until you kind of double your population. Again, this is based on what other people have reported to the national organization. NLPA also puts out kind of this guideline or this median for acres of park per 1,000 people. They show an agency of your size typically has about 9.2 acres per 1,000 people. And you're at 10.2 if you count developed park acres, if we're not counting kind of those natural area acres. If you were to count those natural area acres, we're well. But just this one says they're in line with kind of acres, other agency size. So kind of as what acres you may want to add to your system or develop in your system with that additional population. So ultimately, we took all of this GIS information, we took all of those scores, we began to analyze it using GIS, so using computer modeling and then computer mapping. We began to look at how that level of service is distributed across the district. We are really concerned with walkability, so walkable access to parks. What parks can people access within a 10-minute walk of their house? We typically use this 880 rule, if you will. Very simply ask, would you send your 8-year-old daughter or your 80-year-old father across that street to a park on the other side? Across that freeway to a park on the other side? Across that river? Can they access that park across the river by walking? And if you can't, that kind of creates this pedestrian barrier. And you'll see as we go to the next slide, kind of where these barriers impact the level of service.
Better connectivity in our electronics presentation.
Broadcasting on the Teams link is just not on the big screen now, if that helps. There we go. Sorry about that. I didn't do it right. It was me.
So again, this 880 rule creates a barrier to actually do parks by walking. Again, for that 10-minute walk, really what we're looking at is what do I have access to within a 10-minute walk from my house?
Can you stop?
Quit playing with the mouse, you guys.
Yeah.
You're just messing.
Yeah.
Off the Minecraft.
So again, thinking back to looking at those parks and counting all those components, what do I have access to? How many components do I have access to within a 10-minute walk in my house? And what's the quality of those components? So these orange gradients really tell us where the highest level of service is, how the level of service is distributed across the district. The darker the orange, the more and better access you have within a 10-minute walk. We see dark orange in a couple places, we see some light orange, and we see some gray areas. We also see, I don't know if you can see it real well, there's a little purple hatch. And those are areas that are only serviced by schools. We know the schools do offer some level of service. Typically, we can get in on, after school hours, on weekends, use playground, use ball fields, those types of things, but it's really limited. So we want to recognize that those schools are available at some point, but they really aren't providing the same level of service as district parks. So again, in this map, dark orange is good. Light orange is we have access to something, and those gray areas kind of outside of that 10-minute walk. Now, just because an area is gray doesn't mean that we need to provide level of service. And those may be industrial areas. My favorite example of gray areas is we did a study out in Arlington County, Virginia, a few years ago. We identified this big gray area in the northern part of the county. And as we zoomed in on aerial photography, we found out that was Arlington National Cemetery. So maybe not a place that we need to provide swing sets and, well. So we talked again about kind of this, what I have access to within a 10-minute walk in my house. The highest level of service in the district is right near Highland Park. If you see that star that's floating around here, if I lived in that location, I can access 7 different parks within a 10-minute walk. I can access 41 components from that point. So that is kind of, it gives you an example of what we're looking at when we're talking about level of service and what that access might be. What those orange gradient maps don't tell us is what should that level of service be. We know we can't build Island Park kind of next to every home in the district. So what should that level of service be? We often think about this as kind of that typical neighborhood park. Typically, we see in neighborhood parks, we see a playground. Maybe we see a court of some kind, maybe a basketball court, maybe a pickleball court, maybe a horseshoe pit, those types of things. We often see a piece of open turf where the kids can go kick the ball, throw the frisbee. Maybe there's a loop walk there. Maybe there's a picnic shelter there. So typically, we're thinking of that typical neighborhood park. That's about 4 components, maybe 5 components. We went out and visited the new Aero Park that's going to be opening, and that has 5 or 6 components. So, on that neighborhood park scale, but kind of increasing that level, increasing that standard a little bit as well. So this map takes that orange gradient, it's all the same data, and it begins to tell us where we meet that target. So if our target is everybody has access to at least 4 components, where is that? And this map, that's those purple areas. So anywhere that you can, those residents, those users have access to at least that typical neighborhood park, or meeting that standard for us. Areas in yellow we think of as an opportunity. That's areas where we currently have some parkland, but maybe those parks just aren't performing the way they should. Maybe we have a tennis court that needs to be resurfaced in that area. And so it's not kind of meeting that target. Maybe it's a park that has plenty of land, but only has a piece of open turf. And we can develop that and put in a playground, a basketball court, and a piece of open turf. So opportunities to increase our level of service without even buying more land. Again, areas in gray are areas outside of that 10-minute walk. Really, the key then is to look at, are those residential areas? Should we be providing a level of service in those areas? One of the great things about GIS is there's all kinds of data out there, and we can overlay census data on those purple, gray, and yellow areas. And in this map, in this slide, we can look specifically at those purple areas and know that 32% of the population, 32% of residents live in a purple area. Almost half of residents live in a yellow area. 23% have to go further than a 10-minute walk to get to some sort of opportunity. So about 77% of residents, 3/4 of residents have access to something within a 10-minute walk of their house. And I think that's really something we can celebrate, but begin to strive to improve that 45%. Again, there's all kinds of data out there, and we can dive in even deeper. We can look at what is the median household income of each of those areas. So the purple areas, what's that? Are we providing better services to higher income areas or better services to low income areas? What's the, again, what is the percent of the population? What's the diversity index? What's the crime index of those areas? So I pulled those statistics here, and in general, again, this is kind of grouping all those gray areas together, realizing that they're spread all across the district. Those areas generally have lower level of service. And that is actually a little uncommon to have fewer parks in lower income areas. So I think that's really a goal, maybe of the district, is to really look at those gray areas, determine which of them we really need to provide some level of service or an improved level of service. What if we're not talking about walking? What if we're talking about people having a car, people having a bike? If we look at kind of this 1 mile access, what's our level of service if people have access to a car? If people are willing to walk 20, 30 minutes to a park? People are willing to get on a bus, people willing to get their bikes out and ride to a park. We see pretty good coverage if you have a car. 99% of the population lives within 1 mile of this kind of target area. So I think the focus then begins to be on that walkable level of service, really improving those yellow areas, those gray areas where we have residents. Yeah.
Thank you, Dave. Very interesting. The next steps in the planning process, we have the town hall meeting that is occurring right now. Our findings and visioning workshop, we started it this afternoon, and it really we will be visioning and looking at, for the first time, what opportunities are there to address some of the some of the concerns or thoughts or key findings. We will be doing that visioning process all the way through the end of the month. We will be looking then at the month of December. We'll be putting the initial draft together, taking it to the city and county for acceptance here as we move forward. Ultimately, the plan will come to the board of the district, who then will provide input and ultimately adopt. Project timeline, we started again back in January, and you can see that there's quite a few steps in here to get from January through June. It's November this month, and as you can tell, we are absolutely right on key. All right, we're on the public meeting, and it's November, and we expect to have the plan delivered within the time frame that we've anticipated. So we thank you for your time. We've provided an awful lot of information, and we know that. We do know that there's quite a bit more information that we did not present, but that will be on the webpage on the future page. So at this point, if you'd like, Kenny, we will be available for questions.
Yeah, well, so what we can do for questions, I'm gonna sit and monitor the chat online. So any questions that come through there, I'll kind of raise my hand. In the meantime, we don't have a huge crowd of people, so if you'd like to have a question, maybe just raise your hand and Christina can bring you the mic, and then you can direct questions to our presenters. If you have something that they can't answer, there's some other folks in the room who might be able to answer those questions as well, but we'll let Jeff and Dave here first line if that's the question, so. Okay. All right.
I'm just wondering, I participated in the survey, but I didn't see any place where we took into account the needs of unhoused people in our community. and how Willamalane is relating to that, to that concern. And I did add some things, in addition, you know what I mean? It wasn't on the list, so I added it. Of course, it didn't make it into the plan. And I'm just concerned about that because we do have relationships with unhoused people in the community as Willamalane does. And it needs to be included somehow in our visioning. How are we serving that population? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Dave, for being here. Thank you, BerryDunn, for presenting those findings. Really great information. I am a disc golf enthusiast, and it seems like, is it fair to say that disc golf was fairly prevalent in your findings in the community input? Can you elaborate on some of those findings, as well as kind of give us insight about what's the disc golf community's next steps, as well as what's Willamalane's next steps? And then also, I heard you mention that visioning workshop. I was wondering if disc golf made the cut in that first visioning workshop as well. So sorry about bombarding questions.
Okay, let me see if I can address it. Disc golf came up in numerous ways. In the community engagement, we heard quite a bit about disc golf during our kind of investigation or assessment of what national and regional trends would be playing a role in the district in the next 20 years. Disc golf was very well represented. When we asked folks how important certain activities or opportunities in the parks are, disc golf as well came up into being one of the top, I'd say top 10 or 12 items, if I remember right. And so in answer to your question about the visioning, we didn't go in yet into some of those areas. What we'll be looking at, though, is what is the capacity in the community to support the disc golf course that you have already, as well as other potential disc golf courses. We definitely recognize the importance of the game and the sport, and how popular it certainly is. And I'm a disc golf player too.
And we typically travel with disc, even though.
So is there any advice that you would give to the disc golf community moving forward in, participating in more of these town halls, or is there anything else that we can do to make it apparent?
I think I would throw that back at our district representatives, other than to say that I know in my work and my opportunity to interact with the district board and the employees, people are very interested in hearing advocacy and hearing what you have to say. And so, again, I don't want to step out of line in that case, but I would continue to make just as you are tonight, make your concerns and thoughts known.
And I can respond to that. I'm sorry to catch your name. Adam, was it?
I'm out.
Okay, Adam, hello. So yeah, we are gonna bake all of those elements into this. We have to prioritize. There's a lot that we have to do once we get the final findings, but what you can do now is continue. We have public meetings every Wednesday at 6 o'clock. We value public comment, and just come in and just continue to let the board know how important it is to the community and why. And I know it's a board that listens and then instructs the staff to act upon what their wishes are based on what the community wants.
Great advice, thank you.
And if we were to measure public input just by what we hear at board meetings, the only two things our citizens are concerned about in this community is pickleball and pump tracks. So that just as far as overall volume.
You can have the
So-
equestrians.
That's true, yes, equestrians.
Bigger pickleball.
Pickleball.
Quite
Hey,
cool.
that question, get that back.
So in some of those slides that we're talking about, you highlighted swimming and walking as way up there on the list of things that people are excited about. I use all three facilities. I come keeper once a week. I go with Ortiz and G's pool, and I go to WAC, and I take 15 classes a week. And there are not enough swimming lanes. There's not enough swimming hours. It's it's crazy especially at 14th and G. I know that it's a little offset by the fact that, Splash is closed for repairs. But when we were switched over to Splash, when G Street was closed, there was still just people just waiting and waiting to get into lanes. It really was a sad situation. And my comment about walking on loop trails, there needs to be markers so people know how far they've walked. And I would encourage the recreational facilities folks to organize group walks for safety, especially us 55+ people.
That is great. That is great advice. In terms of swimming, I will tell you that in the survey and in the community engagement process, we heard a lot about exactly that topic. We also heard about the need for potentially expansion of what the swimming opportunities are, and particularly an outdoor pool. And in fact, as we presented earlier, an outdoor pool or an expansion of existing facility, co-location with one of the other pools may be a good opportunity in the future. But you're right, the aquatic staff have also weighed in with us in terms of what they see from their end. And you're absolutely correct in terms of the use and the needs and desires for lap lanes and other types of swimmings.
But can also just, I'm sorry, add some more feedback, and really thank you for saying that. We're still trying to rebound from COVID and getting frontline staff, so staffing is still a major issue. We don't always have to necessarily wait for a new facility to be built. We recognize that we need to expand hours. We're continuing to work on that, so appreciate you saying that, and I can assure you that's something you're actively working on to get more lifeguards, keep pools open longer, take care of more people, and not have everything so that's.
Yeah,
So thank you.
we hear that wherever we go for classes, more
So
staff.
if you know of anyone that's interested, apply at willamalane.org/hiring.
That's a place for me on every spot.
Hi, my name's Andre. During your presentation, you pointed out that 23% of Springfield constituents don't have a park near them, and they're usually in the lower income brackets. Are you guys gonna be assessing where the best place to place parks in those gray areas might be so that Willamalane could possibly take action in the future?
Absolutely. In fact, we mapped those areas that relate not only to income, but to the crime index and diversity. And then start to look at what opportunities there are nearby as well. What kind of infill opportunities, maybe what can you do to the existing parks that are in those areas? But yes, the priorities ultimately will be decided by the district and the board, but we'll provide all of that data, all of that information in maps. I wish I had a picture of one now, but we've actually already started to map what some of those priority areas are.
It's not necessarily, again, it's not necessarily always about adding a new park. Sometimes it's dealing with those pedestrian barriers. So it may be that there's a barrier between you and that park on the other side. And if we can just somehow deal with that pedestrian barrier, all of a sudden 3,500 people have access to a park. And so we talked about earlier today about some strategies about how you might deal with that situation. And again, all those yellow areas have something, so maybe that's in those areas. Yeah, there's these gray areas that we currently don't have anything. So how do we deal with those?
Yeah, we have a question from our online, and before I do that, I want to give a correction on something that Michael shared. We have public board meetings every second Wednesday of the month, not every Wednesday. So if you're looking to attend, if you go to willamalane.org/meetings, you can see the full schedule. You can learn how to attend and how to make public comment.
Thank you, Kenny. That's why there was no one there.
So, question from our online audience. I'm gonna read this verbatim, so tell me if you need me to repeat any part of it. I find it interesting that, quote, more things to do in parks is desirable, end quote, but the stats show we fall short of providing enough parks and open spaces within walking distance. There's only so much money that we can receive as taxpayers. In your opinion, should the goal be to provide more parks with walking distance with less amenities or less parks with more amenities?
You want to try that?
That's a good question, and it really, I think, comes down to the board and what your goal is the district's goal to provide 100% of the population within a 10-minute walk. I mean, it's a national movement right now, that things are going, but we also know there's communities that's just never gonna happen. So is there an in-between? Is there the chance to work with schools? We've seen programs across the country where agencies are working with schools to provide better access to school grounds and actually creating neighborhood parks on public land. But again, that's kind of a sticky issue too, with the current kind of climate around school. I don't feel always comfortable going into the schoolyard. So I think it's an individual evaluation of each area. You know, is it a pedestrian barrier? Is it we need to add land there? Is it we need to increase the maintenance on this park? Is it we need to add 2 components in this park? I think, again, community involvement is very important in any of those. And we're not here to say, you know, that park has to have a new playground. It's to give you the blueprint going forward and how to deal with these areas and how to think about level of service kind of at a different level. And then it's more than just acres of land that people kind of need kind of these things to do, and can think about it in parks and our level of service in what is there to do in that park versus that park's 2.7 acres. Hope that helps.
And if I could before the next question, just kind of expand just a little bit. When we look at a particular area and decide, okay, this is underserved or not served, and we start to look at crime index or diversity and those things, we also really look at who the improvements are going to impact in terms of the number of people. So we could go and fix a gray area that may only impact 10 people or 30 people. Or as we looked at some of these earlier today, we realize there are some areas that impact thousands, 3,000 or more individuals. And so it's important to kind of take that utilitarian look at it to see which areas. But again, we'll be providing all of that information, all those recommendations moving forward.
My name's Karen. Do you are you guys in any kind of like collaboration with transportation planning in relation to the parks on alternative modes of transportation, like safe bicycle routes from location to location?
We met with a number of advocates in terms of trails and trail planners from, I think the gentleman was from the county. I'm looking for a nod here, but in any event, we are taking into account the different plans and different future opportunities that we know about. And we know that what we finish with are also going, it will be used in some of the future planning efforts, especially with, I think there's a new transportation plan coming from Lake County, if I heard the gentleman the other day correctly.
Yeah, and the transportation folks also at the city of Springfield and Lake County and Safe Routes to School folks, we've been trying to engage with regularly so we can coordinate our efforts.
I was just gonna follow up on that. There has been a Main Street plan going on that the city's been doing, and as I look at it, based upon where I live, Main Street is one of those pedestrian barriers for the community of Brentwood Estates, which is over 1,000 people in those townhouses, and there's no park really to speak of except for Tyson, which is one of your lowest ones. But the barrier of Main Street to get down here to these facilities is probably a big one.
No questions.
I'm gonna give a last call for questions online as well.
Just a little bit of scientific tabulated advice. A lot of the 50+ folks that spend all their days at WAC. And I kept telling them, come with me tonight, come with me tonight. They're like, no, you go talk. Oh, yeah, great, thanks. But the sentiment amongst that group of ladies and gentlemen is that we improve the current parks that we have, adding the amenities, the components, before we, spend way more money on new parks. There are plenty of parks, they just need some improvement. And it's sad to see that Tyson Park is so low on the thing, but an open field, it needs some love. And there are lots of parks that just need one or two more components, and you will see an impact. Actually,
Thank you for that comment. I will tell you that in the survey, we asked folks, we asked respondents to tell us whether they would rather have the district expand or take care of what they have. And it was a mixed bag. It was about 50-50. So we did ask that question.
they kept saying park safety, park maintenance. That's a clue that it may not be 50-50.
Sorry, just to follow up on the homelessness issue. I didn't put it in the form of a question, and I guess I better put it in the form of a question. How can the concerns for homeless neighbors be included in your planning process?
I think the best way would be to utilize the webpage and provide input. Christina, perhaps you could help elaborate on that. I will tell you that within our maintenance evaluation, we do address homelessness, houseless, and those issues. But it's not in terms of as much supporting as it is how do we ensure quality experiences for all park users. So that's an area that perhaps we need to dive a little deeper into in the planning effort.
Can I just clarify, are you saying because for public safety or what is our role to, address houselessness in Springfield?
I'm saying, how does Willamalane, Willamalane wants to serve the whole community. I understand that. Part of the community is unhoused neighbors. So how are unhoused neighbors included and welcomed into Willamalane programs, and how are they treated by Willamalane staff and the system? And then also, so that's one area. And then the other area is Willamalane has a lot of resources. I mean, maybe not money, but land and places and bathrooms and various things that homeless people maybe need in their lives. Shelters, a place to be out of the rain during the day, for example. So are there ways that as you're looking down the road, how you develop parks, can you keep in mind those needs as well? Not just sports needs, but basic human needs, like go to the bathroom, a way to be out of the rain.
Thank you.
I did a last call for online questions, and we haven't had anything in about 4 minutes, so I think we're probably clear on the online audience. If there are any other questions for the group, I guess this is probably our last call. Anybody else? Okay, I think we can conclude.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna give one final reminder. So thank you so much for everybody who is in attendance in person and online tonight. If you want to take a deeper look at the data that was presented tonight, please go to willamalane.org/future. The other thing you can do at willamalane.org/future, if you have an idea, you do not want the surveying process to end, you can submit an idea at any point at that same landing page. So please feel free to go there at any point, and thank you again. Have a great night.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Kitty. Always gives you nice to water.